So what insurance may provide coverage for a business's losses? So there's many different types of business property insurance policies, and they're written in different ways. Different industries have different ways in which they call their policies. It's like reading Greek to some people, which for me, I'm Greek, but no, just kidding. I am Greek, but the policies are still very dense and very hard to understand, even for some of us professionals. The most sought after policy in retrospect you would have wanted pre-COVID-19 is what we call all risk coverage. And I call it the insurance unicorn. You know, you have these businesses that are called unicorns from Silicon Valley. You know, is it $1 billion business? And I'm saying for COVID-19 business interruption claims purposes, all risk coverage that contains no exclusions is the insurance unicorn in this setting. It's property insurance that covers losses from any cause that's not excluded. Opposite to that is something called named peril coverage. And named peril coverage is only insuring for causes that are listed in the policy. So you may have a policy that says I am insuring for virus contamination, or I am insuring for pandemics. Those types of policies are a little bit more uncommon. And then within your property insurance policy, and I will say the majority of clients, at least that I've advised, and then my partners have advised here at HMB, have property insurance, and within the property insurance policy is the business interruption coverage or the business interruption endorsement. And that is the type of coverage that most businesses are seeking today as a result of COVID-19. Those policies relate to providing reimbursement for rent, lease payments, relocation costs, loan payments, taxes, fixed costs, lost revenue. I mean, it depends on your policy. Net income is one of the major claims or major definitions within the endorsement. The second most relevant coverage that I've referenced earlier today, but that usually is in a property insurance policy for a business, is what we call civil authority coverage. And that reimburses for lost profits and other economic losses when a government issues a legal order that results in your business being shut down or severely impacting your business. It really just depends how your policy is written. Unfortunately, I'm going to keep saying it depends how your policy is written several more times throughout today's presentation. I apologize in advance. If you're a builder, you'll have a builder's risk policy. Then there are other types of policies that I won't get into because I don't want to bore you, but there's ordinary payroll coverages, extended period of indemnity coverages, also contingent business interruption coverage. I'm going to pause here because contingent business interruption coverage is when, let's say you're a restaurant and you're in an area where all your food suppliers have been shut down because they've had a COVID-19 outbreak. And so you cannot get your food supply, you cannot get your materials that you need to run your business. Depending on how your policy is written, you potentially have coverage for that via the contingent business interruption coverage in your property policy. Then there's contingent extra expense. That's if if you had to go outside your normal group of suppliers and go to a different customer supplier, and that resulted in extra expense or cost that was significant enough to make a claim under your policy. Then there's also ingress and egress coverage, which, as it sounds, if your property is shut down, the ability to access your property is shut down for some reason pursuant to a government order, or just the realities of somebody having COVID-19, that could potentially provide coverage. Then there's extra expense coverage, which is another layer of coverage that typically follows business interruption, and that's for non-ordinary expenses after an incident like COVID-19. Then there's pollution, contamination, and environmental coverage, which you would think this type of pandemic would clearly fall under. But again, you have to read your policy to know exactly what type of coverage is allotted. A lot of times that's for cleanup costs because there's a pollutant or contaminant on your premises. What we're seeing for a lot of our business clients in the manufacturing area, they're in the manufacturing fields, they're spending upwards of $30,000 to $50,000 to clean their facilities because somebody who was present who was an employee or a vendor said, "Hey, I was at your property, I was at your manufacturing facility, I had COVID-19." And if you hear that and you knew you had an active case, many times, and consult your trusted advisor before doing this, but many times the facility's shut down and a specialized cleaning company comes in. The cost for that is extensive because the services are extensive, which are more than $30,000, could be up to $100,000 or more, depending how large your facility is. That's where you should look for your pollution and contamination and environmental coverage. Also, there's crisis management coverage, although crisis management is more of a coverage that is when there's a widespread disaster and you need to communicate to the public, and you have to hire someone to communicate that you've been impacted and what needs to happen. That may happen if you're in the context of COVID-19. Let's say you're a food manufacturer and you have unfortunately had COVID-19 on the premises, and you believe that some of the food that you've put out to the public has been contaminated. This coverage might provide you with somebody to assist in notifying the public and the crisis. Again, read your policy. Then the last type of coverage that I'll talk about is event cancellation insurance. Very easy to understand what that typically is. For whatever reason, you've obtained event cancellation insurance due to COVID-19, you had to cancel the event. There's going to be an issue of are you postponing the event, or are you just canceling it outright for that year? Again, this is where you're going to have to read your policy closely and lean on your trusted advisor to make that determination. And you have to be careful in how you communicate to the people that were going to attend the event so that you aren't potentially negating coverage, or when I say negating coverage, I mean, hurting your chances of obtaining coverage because of the way that you may have communicated the cancellation of that event. instead of using the words that might have been necessary pursuant to what's in your policy. I would, in those situations, lean on your broker. And in all situations, that's my takeaway here with these policies. My first piece of advice is not, aside from make the claim, my first piece of advice is these business policies are complex. You need to lean on your broker. And you lean on your broker to the extent you can, because sometimes people just buy policies and then they really don't, they buy it via the internet, or they buy it through a very relaxed medium, and they don't have a close relationship with their broker, or they don't have a clear line of communication, so they don't have a broker to lean on. And then in that context, I would say lean on your attorneys. And they will hopefully get you the right answer, like the attorneys here at HMB. And so what other non-business interruption insurance policies could businesses have that might be triggered by COVID-19? So this is, we'll get into this in more detail later on in the presentation or in a subsequent slide. But this is, depends on your business's industry and what policies you've already purchased. And that includes the types of policies I'm thinking of, which would be triggered by third parties most of the time, are your directors and officers, your errors and omissions, your professional liability, your CGL policy, as it's commonly called, which is your commercial general liability, your umbrella policies for all that you may have under your CGL or all these other policies, your pollution policy. And earlier I was talking about first party pollution policy coverage. Now I'm talking about third party pollution coverage. Then your employee benefits liability, your workers' compensation, and your cyber liability.